Welcome to the BNB Investing Podcast for real estate investors. Fix and flippers and realtors exploring investment options with Airbnbs and short-term rentals through acquisition, leasing, or management to generate consistent monthly revenue. Join us for a chat with experienced and successful short-term rental investors to hear their story of how they got started and created wealth by building scalable businesses. We also explore various service providers and lenders that help make our businesses more efficient and maximize revenue in this awesome sharing economy. Welcome your host, Rich Munroe.
Hey everyone, Rich Munroe here with BNB Investing Group. Thanks for jumping on this week. BNB Investing Group helps new investors grow a scalable business, whether you're trying to buy properties, master lease them, or manage for other investors. We help investors kind of build a scalable business. And so if that's something you're interested in, feel free to reach out to me directly on Facebook Messenger. It's probably the easiest way, and we can schedule a quick call and see if you are ready to take action at this time. So I'm kind of looking forward to today's Facebook Live. I've got a friend of mine on with us, Keston Glasgow. He's a very successful real estate investor. And he is focused a lot on kind of helping people with mindset, which a lot of us kind of put in the back burner. It's not something that we treat as a priority, which I think is a huge mistake. And so for those of you jumping on, please put a quick yes in the comments if you can hear me okay. And I'd encourage you guys to throw out some questions as we're chatting, and we'll definitely try to get to those towards the end. So Keston, welcome, and please give us a brief introduction on your background.
What's up, bro? Thanks for having me. Truly appreciated. And so, guys, my name is Keston Glasgow, and I am originally from Trinidad. And so my family and we migrated to the U.S. and to Brooklyn, New York. That's where I kind of started. And as an immigrant, I started to clean my church. That's where my start began in 2002 when I came to the US. And so that was the way that I was able to help provide and help my parents with certain things. I was the guy that was the last guy that was actually cleaning the church when people left after their baby showers and stuff. So I had late nights, early Sunday mornings, that type of thing. And I moved from doing that to actually handing out flyers for Golden Crust. That was another thing that nice. I did, going to 42nd Street, after high school and handing out flyers. And then I started doing demolition, construction, and any little thing I could do to get some money. That was my hustle. And so quickly kind of moved my way up, and I started working for Apple. Then I moved my way up to being a genius, and then I just did a whole bunch of things, just trying to make it, because I don't know if you've ever done this, Rich, but I'm that guy that I would say to God, I'm like, hey, God, if I could only make $20,000 a year, like, I'll be the best person alive, right? So you get to 20, then you're like 50, God, just 50, right? And then you get to 100. Like, if I could only make $100K a year, like, I would not need anything else. And so I worked my way up, bro, to having that 6-figure job. I started to work on Wall Street as a cybersecurity engineer. And I could look out the windows over the Brooklyn Bridge in New York City, and I thought that I had made it, bro, because going from handing out flyers and Golden Crust to now being on Wall Street, kind of looking out the windows, you could look over the Brooklyn Bridge. I thought that was every person's dream.
Right.
And when I got it at first, it really was. But there was a desire inside of me that still made me feel like there's something more to life. And that's when it made me start thinking that across the bridge, there were properties and people owned those properties. And so I started to think, like, man, somebody owns those properties. Somebody owns this building that I'm in. They just know something that I don't. And so you're making a really good 6-figure job. You still want more to life. And so internally, I was conflicted because I didn't want to be ungrateful for all the things that I had. Right. And so I would call my wife and be like, why are we doing this? I want to do something else with my life and all of that. But when I had that thought, the other side of that thought was, but how are you going to pay for your insurance? How are you going to pay for your mortgage? Like how is all of this going to work? And it wasn't until 2020 when COVID happened. And my wife and I, we had just invested about $30K to get into our first coaching program. And they went dark, disappeared when COVID happened. We had already taken like about 2 classes, and I just held on to those classes, bro, because we were at a crossroads. That crossroads was, do we continue to move on, or this just wasn't for me, right? You know, like when the worst happens and you're just like, see, I told you that this isn't for people like me, right?
Right.
But we moved on. We kept on going. One of our coaches in the program, he kept on supporting us, although he wasn't a contractor with that company anymore. And so we continued to grind. And so I hired my first high performance coach also, like right after, because I'm that guy. I had a great 6-figure job. I started doing Uber. So I was doing Uber in the morning from like 4 a.m. in New York City. Then I would park the car, jump on the LIRR train, go to Manhattan, go to work, come back home, and then do real estate, right? Like my lunchtime was real estate. And so I was using every single hour of my day. And I felt like I was still stuck because I'm like, how do people make $1 million? Like I am grinding, right? And it wasn't until I hired my high performance coach and she taught me how to manage my day and prioritize and, you know, like just the importance of the things that you do. And man, that gave me wings. And so July of 2020, that was my last day at my 9-to-5 job. Now, this isn't advice for anyone. Please don't do this. This is my story. I left my 6-figure job, bro, before getting one deal. Getting one deal. Burned the boats. And from July to December, my wife and I wholesaled 1.5 times my 6-figure salary in 6 months.
Nice.
In 2021, that's when there was a level of frustration going into December, because although wholesaling is great and it's cool and you make money, it was like, but I got to keep doing this thing over and over again, right? Like, what if I don't get that next wholesale deal? And so that made me say, I need cash flow. And cash flow is the only thing that I believe somebody coming out of a 9-to-5 that's not an entrepreneur and doesn't have that entrepreneurial mind with risk and all that type of stuff. Cash flow is the only thing, like a job, that pays you every month like you're an employee. And so I'm like, I need cash flow.
So Keston, let's back up just a second, because I don't know if folks followed the part of what you were saying there, because for me, it's tremendous that you were able to, you know, cut the umbilical cord with the corporate job, without having anything lined up. I mean, so, you know, I was fortunate enough when I left the corporate world from my 6-figure job. This was right after 9/11, so this is quite some time ago. I was in the consumer debt buying space, wasn't in real estate, and I basically lined up a bunch of transactions that allowed me to just segue, leave the corporate job, and with my same relationships, had like $1 million in revenue the first year that we did that. And so that for me, I think was probably the only way that I'd be able to take that plunge. And obviously I haven't looked back since, but talk to us a little bit about how you were able to kind of do that. And I know you prefaced it with, you don't recommend to others, but I just want to understand kind of your thought process and how you kind of came to that conclusion.
So there were several things happening at the same time. At the same time, my wife's mom, she had leukemia. And we moved from New York to Georgia to take care of her. And so the same time, now you guys got to picture this. It's COVID. It's the scariest time of nobody knows and understand what's going on. My job is probably the most secure job in the world because it's cybersecurity. And now everything seemed to be like remote. And so my job was secure. They were like, dude, are you sure? But I felt like it was a God thing. I felt like God's voice was just so loud that he said, pick up, go to Georgia, and leave your job. And that's what I leaned on the most. I didn't have this big savings. I had nothing but a dream and my consistency and discipline. I know for a fact that I could rely on my consistency and discipline. That's probably my biggest asset, my consistency and discipline. And I knew if I knew the steps, which I was given the steps, and I just applied it, I was guaranteed success. And so that's the principles that I followed that gave me the confidence, because at the end of the day, I believe in me and my discipline and consistency. So that's a mindset thing, right? And that's my jam.
Makes sense. So you started to recognize the grind in wholesaling, where you have to constantly keep the pipeline fed, and if you don't, there's no cash flow coming in. And so you kind of pivoted and looked at more of kind of the passive income, consistent monthly cash flow, similar to what I did, because I used to do a lot of rehabs, and I got burnt out quickly from managing contractors and the financial stress of not selling the house on time. And so I recognized the need as well for that consistent monthly revenue to kind of calm things down. So tell us a little bit about that part.
So in the end of December, man, I'm talking to all these sellers and I'm not getting anyone to say yes to me buying their properties creatively, because I didn't have money to buy their house traditionally. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. And so I needed seller financing and creative financing. And so that's when I joined another mentorship and learned how to sell and learned the art of sales. And so when I jumped in, and from 2021, that's when we went from 1 to 21 doors, just kind of learning creative financing, learning how to pitch all types of different subject to deals, you name it. I was able to pitch it. And then I also learned how to raise private money. And so all of these skills were the things that I was just so adamant about learning and executing that we were able to scale pretty fast in 1 year, pretty much.
Okay. So for those of us that are fairly new to real estate, what's subject to mean?
Subject to means when you're buying a property and you're leaving the loan in the seller's name. So to understand this concept, we got to know that the loan and the ownership, which is title and deed, they're not the same thing. When I got into real estate, when I got into houses, period, I didn't know they were different. I thought you bought the property and it's a loan, and the loan shows that you're the owner of the house. That's not true. You get a separate instrument, which is the title and deed, and the loan is just the debt. It's like picture this. You borrow, if I come to you, Rich, and I say, hey man, lend me $10, and you give me $10, and you're like, when are you going to pay me back? You got to pay me $1 a year for the next 10 years for this $10 that you just loaned to me. And I got to pay you with 10% interest, right? Now I take that money and I go buy a loaf of bread. Does that bread belong to you, or it belongs to me?
Belongs
It
to
belongs
you.
to me.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with a house. When a bank gives you money, you take that money, you go buy a house. The house belongs to you because the receipt is the title and deed. Just like your receipt for the bread is your ownership of the bread, right? It shows that you're the owner. And when I understood that, I started buying houses where the loan would stay in that person's name, but the title and deed, which is the receipt, is transferred to me. So that's subject to the existing mortgage.
Okay. So your ability to grow so quickly and add so many doors, a lot of those deals were structured that way.
Yeah, and also seller finance. Seller finance was my bread and butter. And seller finance just means that the owner becomes the bank, right? They're the bank, and they're like, I'm going to give you this loan and you pay me over time. So it creates this win situation for everyone involved. They get more money because they could typically oversell the property because they're taking the risk, right? They're not running your credit. They're not doing anything that the banks would typically do.
Right.
They're just giving you this loan, this property. And so we've scaled up really fast that way.
Okay. So you got up to 20 or so doors now. What did you end up doing with those properties once you acquired them?
So at the end of 2021, I always have a story for like the transitions. At the end of 2021, matter of fact, it was New Year's. I received this call from one of my tenants for a property that we owned in New York. And the heater went out, the boiler went out. And it's the New Year, so it's really cold. And they're like, man, we're freezing. Could you get this fixed? So I send my dad over to the property because he still lives in New York. And he's like, bro, you got to buy a new furnace. This thing is done. And so when I had one of my boys go tell me, see if he could fix it or whatever, I needed a new furnace, $7K. I'm like, oh my God, $7K for this property, but it was a duplex, but it had 3 units in it because I fixed up the basement and I had somebody in there as well. So this property was bringing in about $5K a month. So it didn't hurt as bad because it was producing a lot of revenue. But it made me think, if one of my properties in Georgia that was bringing in $400 to $500 a month did that, it would take me years to get that money back, hoping that nothing new goes wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And that made me say, I got to get rid of these small properties. And so we got into multifamily, like shortly after in March, got into multifamily. That's when we bought our first 48 unit property in May or a little bit after. And that deal was just amazing. And so what I did was I started selling some of my smaller properties because I had gotten so used to buying properties without my own money, right? That was a flex. But then I started to realize that having money parked in properties, or I didn't have money. Well, I did because I owned the properties, but I could also roll it into a bigger asset and get a higher return over time, putting the money in multifamily or in other faster investments. And so I played Monopoly and I sold some of those properties that I bought without my money. So think about this, right? I had zero money out of my pocket buying these properties, but then we're cashing out hundreds of thousands of dollars and moving them into multifamily properties and other investments. And so that's what we did. We just kind
Nice.
of moved money around, and it's almost like pulling money out of thin air, really.
And you're just 5xing it, 10xing it, keeping it moving. I like it.
Exactly.
Very cool. So how do you help folks with that are struggling, that are trying to get started, and mindset is such a big thing that folks don't really, like I said earlier, spend a whole lot of time thinking about. They're either like you did, and I've done this too. I've spent a lot of money on coaching courses and kind of trying to learn different aspects of real estate. Even though I had done probably 20 or 30 rehabs, I still spent about 40 grand on a coaching program to kind of have those systems in place and be able to tap into their experience. And so a lot of people do that, and then they just get stagnant with it. They don't really execute.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how do you help folks get through that?
So one of the main things that when it comes to the reason why people don't execute, and I want to give this example with another story, right? Because I like using a framework, the GPS. Everyone knows a GPS, right? Everyone uses GPSs all the time, every day. And so there are four main elements to a GPS, four main elements. The first element is a connection. And every GPS, you need T-Mobile, you need Sprint, Wi-Fi, you need something, Verizon, for your GPS to work. Now, how that relates to us is that every single person needs a connection to their higher power. And this was one of the things that I realized in me getting started. And so when you listen to all of the gurus and all of that talk, they say, go meditate, you got to meditate and all these different things. That's that connection. And so it doesn't matter your religion, it doesn't matter your practices. When you connect to that higher source of power, whoever that may be for you, it's like having a connection to that GPS, because without that connection, your GPS don't work, or you don't get the right directions, right? It just kind of leaves you hanging. And so that's the first element that I always tell people to work on when it comes to being able to take action. Mm-hmm. The second element, you had something to say there?
Well, I'm just going to say from my perspective, what I found said a little bit differently, but I think it's the same result is, if you don't have a good picture in your mind of where you're trying to get to and have the ability to basically, not only consciously, but subconsciously, throw that as a goal and be able to, visualize yourself getting to that place. And, I think that's basically saying the same thing you just said, essentially. And that's what I've done time and time again with different things that we've grown our business with. And even when I was in the corporate world, of being able to excel. So,
1000%, 1000%. The subconscious mind is a major part of the things that I help people with in redoing their paradigms. And I'll jump into that. Because the second element of the GPS is current location. You got to know where you are, right? Every GPS needs to know where you are. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to give you the right directions. For us, we need to know and understand where we are, our self-image. Who are we actually? This is a question that most people ask themselves, but never find the answer to it. What can I do? Right? That's your current location. What skills do you have? Like, you got to understand and know, like, what traumas do you suffer with? Because the traumas, your beliefs, that entire subconscious mind, and understanding what is in your subconscious is the thing that could paralyze you when you start and realize, oh crap, I don't even see myself as a real estate investor.
Right.
So what do you see yourself as? And so this is where I spend the most time with people, because it's so important to understand your current location. The next element of that GPS is your destination. Where are you going? That's the address, right? Like you need to put an address in your GPS, and it's the same for every single person. Where are you going? What? And let's make it specific to real estate. Yeah, you want to go into real estate, but imagine, Rich, if you typed in, we live in Atlanta. So you typed in Atlanta in your GPS, it's not going to give you directions. It's just going to drop you in the middle of nowhere, right? You have to put a specific address. And so most people, when they get into real estate, they just say, I want to do real estate. Okay, great. Do you want to be an Airbnb investor? You want to be a multifamily investor? You want to be a land development person? And there's so many specifics when it comes to real estate. You got to understand where you're going. And so that's your vision. Like, what are you visualizing? Where are you going? Right. So super important to know that. And the fourth and last element that I make sure that I try to share with people and is super important for the GPS is turn-by-turn directions. Every single GPS gives you turn-by-turn directions. And I don't know about you, Rich, but there have been times when I disrespected my GPS and I didn't turn where they said to turn, and I ended up in traffic, right? Like I've definitely done that.
Right.
And how does that relate to us? Well, this is a few ways. A mentor gives you turn-by-turn directions because they've been where you're going. And so being able to listen to those turn-by-turn directions is so important, because when a mentor tells you, hey, you got to make this left, but you're used to going right, and you go right, you end up doing things that you shouldn't have done. You bought a bad deal because you panicked and you didn't listen to your mentor, right? And so turn-by-turn directions is really having faith in what's being communicated to you, especially by people that you trust. And they're all important, because without that connection, you won't be able to get the live updates, right? Like if you didn't get that connection, if you were in the wrong place, in the wrong place, or you didn't have the right paradigms or habits, that's your current location, then you're not going to be able to get to where you want to get to. And so for many people, because they don't understand their current location, they see you doing what you're doing, Rich, and they see it on Instagram, they see it on social media, and they try to act like you right away, but their current location is different than yours. Their financial situation is different than yours. And so we're all starting in different places. And so that's the reason why, like, understanding current location is probably one of the most important things, because everyone has a goal. Everyone wants financial freedom. Like we could guess what most people want, and that's the destination, right?
Yeah.
The reason why most people don't get there is because they don't understand where they are currently. They don't understand the things that they've seen growing up. Money doesn't grow on trees, all these different things. They don't understand how it affects the habits and the actions or inactions that they take. And that's what I help people really understand, how to break those cycles, how to start taking ownership of their lives, how to recreate their self-image, and start taking action towards the goal that they actually want.
No, that's awesome. I love the GPS analogy. I mean, I think that brings it home crystal clear on the process, and so that makes perfect sense. I always tell my kids, and I know that a lot of you probably already do this as well, that you can't really get anything done unless you put your mind to it, right? And so the whole the reverse of that is, you can pretty much do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it. And so it really takes the discipline to really break it down, to kind of get to where you're trying to get to, right?
Yeah. 100%, man. And discipline and consistency, they're like a necessary trait. And one of the reasons why I believe people don't have discipline is because they don't have a purpose. And so they do things without that purpose to know why they're doing it. You continue to do things for money, man. If most people do things for money, they're gonna find a way to quit, because as soon as you become content and your belly is full and you're like, well, I don't really need this. There are people in Africa that needs this more than I do. I'm living an okay life. You start to justify things, and they lose their discipline. They just stop and they quit. But when you do things for a purpose, and you know that the reason why you're doing what you're doing is to create an impact for other people, that's when everything changes. That's when you have self-imposed disciplines to be able to just show up and wake up without an alarm clock. You're excited about life, and things change when you have that purpose. And I love starting people off with helping them discover their purpose, help so that they could have that self-imposed discipline to achieve their goals as well.
So you actually have a Facebook group similar to how I have B&B Investing Group. You have a Facebook group called Purpose, right? Or
yeah, it's called Purpose Ways Community. And the reason why it's Purpose Ways, it's because we are people's GPS ways to helping them find their purpose.
Got it.
So that's now that you know the analogy and all of that, that's the reason why we're a purpose GPS for people.
Very cool. Very cool. Got it. So what led you in this direction, Keston, to kind of help others with this process?
So in one of my communities, I've been teaching people sales, and I started to realize that regardless of how much information someone knew, it wasn't the reason why they executed or not. And once I started to realize that it's not a knowledge problem. A lot of people know exactly what to do, but they're just not doing it. And it made me study and realize that this is a mindset problem. And so I started teaching them mindset, and I've been doing this going on 3 years. And I've seen so many lives change because of it. And I still do it. I still help people for in these communities, in my own community, to discover their purpose and with their mindsets. And I've seen them go out and quit jobs and all of that because they've become so successful in their areas and in their expertise. And so the feeling I started to get from helping someone like discover their purpose and go out and achieve their financial and personal goals, no deal that I've done to this date, and I've done some amazing deals, has ever made me feel as fulfilled as when I help somebody discover their purpose, or I get a call from someone's wife saying, "What did you do to my husband? He's a brand new man." Like, bro, nothing beats it. Absolutely nothing beats it.
Very cool. Very cool. That's awesome. So we're a little running short on time, and excuse me. Let folks know how they can reach out to you and learn more about what you're doing in the community and helping folks out.
So the best way to get out to me, guys, is on Instagram at Kes on Purpose. My Instagram, Kes on Purpose, and just DM me the word B&B. DM me the word B&B, and I'll have something special for you guys. If you need help, like if trying to discover your purpose has been that thing that's kept you back, or a question you've had in your mind, like, why am I even here? Right? Like, that's a question most people ask. Why am I here on earth? Hit me up, DM me the word B&B, and I'm going to know exactly where you came from. And I'll be more than happy to be able to help and hop on a call or whatever you guys need to start you on your path to finding fulfillment.
No, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate your time today, and thanks for sharing. I'm going to throw that in the comments as well, so folks that are watching the replay will have access to it. It's always great to have you on. And so, thanks again for taking the time today, Keston. Appreciate it.
Man, thanks for having me. Everyone in the chat, peace and love, y'all.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for jumping on BNB Investing Group, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks again.
Thanks for jumping on the BNB Investing Podcast this week. Please click on the subscribe and like button below. For more trainings, property tours, and content, you can join my BNB Investing Facebook group by clicking below. If you are ready to grow your short-term rental portfolio and maximize your monthly income, you can click on the link below to schedule a quick strategy call with Rich or someone from his team to see how we can help or point you in the right direction. Stay tuned for our next episode and hope to see you on the BNB Investing Group podcast.